Hello, it's me. In 1587, a group of 120 English settlers arrived in the North Carolina colony of Roanoke and vanished without a trace. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore what may have happened to them. First of all, why did the English want to establish a colony in this region? Well, the area had been explored by Spanish navigators in the 1520s. However, the English began exploring the area in the 1540s. Sir Francis Drake even raided Spanish settlements there. The English also believed that they could profit from capturing slaves in the area. In 1565, the Spanish established a settlement at the mouth of the St. Johns River, but it was destroyed by English privateers in 1568 and again in 1572. Then in 1584, the English established a settlement at Roanoke Island, but that settlement was never self-sufficient and was plagued with disease and conflict with the native population. So in 1587, the colonists decided to establish a new settlement on the mainland. Leading the expedition was John White, an experienced colonist who had helped establish the earlier settlements. He and his men chose a site near present-day Manteo and began constructing homes and a fort. But within a year, the colony was nearly destroyed by a hurricane. Only the fort survived, and many of the settlers died. So in 1588, White led 17 of the survivors back to England on a supply ship. Before leaving, he appointed an acting governor and told the people that if he returned and found the colony had been abandoned, he would sail to England and bring more colonists. When White got back to England, however, he found that the war with Spain prevented him from returning to Roanoke. Instead, he spent the next 3 years in England trying to get another chance to go to America. Meanwhile, one of the settlers who stayed behind in Roanoke was a young woman named Eleanor Dare. In August of 1587, she gave birth to a baby girl and named her Virginia. She was the first European child born in what would become the United States. Finally, in 1590, White was able to get a ship to Roanoke. He arrived to find that the fort was empty and the settlement had been abandoned. All that was left behind was the word Croatoan carved into a post. There was no sign of a struggle and no bodies. The settlers had simply vanished. There are several theories about what happened to the lost colony. One is that the colonists moved to Croatoan Island after their fort was damaged by a hurricane. This theory is based on the fact that the island was only 2 miles away and the word Croatoan was carved into a post when the colonists left. However, when White arrived, he didn't see any signs of the colonists on the island. Another theory is that the colonists were killed and eaten by the native population. There is evidence that the natives fought against the colonists, and some historians believe that the natives would have been able to overpower them. However, if this had happened, we would have likely found more evidence by now. A third theory is that the colonists were taken captive by the Spanish. The Spanish were known to attack English settlements, and they would have had a motive for getting revenge for the destruction of their settlements in the area. However, there is no evidence that the Spanish were ever in the area at the time. A fourth theory is that the colonists were victims of disease. The area had been struck by a hurricane, and the surviving colonists were already weakened from a lack of food and supplies. Disease could have easily wiped out the entire settlement. Finally, a fifth theory is that the colonists simply walked into the wilderness and disappeared. This may sound far-fetched, but the area was dense forest and the colonists were experienced in the wilderness. They could have easily covered up their tracks and avoided being found. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke continues to fascinate people today. And while we may never know what happened to the settlers, we can be grateful that their story has inspired so much curiosity and wonder about our early colonial history. Thanks for watching. Sign up for our free weekly newsletter and get a free audiobook at our website. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.